Now we look at the weekend newspapers with the Mail and Guardian's deputy editor, Beauregard Tromp. Beauregard, good morning. Thank you so much for taking time out to talk with me. Let's start with your actual headline. And it's very pleasing because I had a panel here discussing the economy. And your headline says, politics killed our economy and elections won't fix it. And it's a beautiful article written by your political editor. The argument essentially is that the fighting and the building of state capture interfered with and diverted resources away from what should have actually been done in the economy. Why did you choose to go with this headline and with this story?
Well, I think ultimately, as we go into this election, the long and short of it is what will change for people, what are people voting for. The biggest thing that we are hearing across polling and when we go out into the field and speak to people is that they're concerned about the economy vis-a-vis jobs.
Yes.
And so the question is, what do the political parties offer you in terms of that? What does the ANC offer, DA, EFF, etc.?
And what was your finding?
We found that it was incoherent.
All the parties?
All the parties. There's talk about, yes, we're going to stop this illicit flow of funds
out of the country.
Out of the country. That's the one end. And then there's another thing of, well, we're going to tackle corruption. I mean, these are very broad themes, you know. People need specifics. I think our electorate has become a lot more sophisticated, and they have now been accustomed to this broad language, and they're saying, enough, tell us something specific that's actually going to change my life.
Okay, so the corruption, you know, I moderated a debate yesterday at the Apartheid Museum about looking at the quality of our freedom, a quarter of a century into democracy. And one of the things that people said was that we were always told about the three challenges the country faced, inequality, poverty, and joblessness. But the person wanted to add a fourth one. He said corruption. That is the other big thing that we face in the state. If we look at the City Press, if you could just hold it up to the camera over there on 5. The City Press talks about ANC members on a list that are being fingered by its integrity committee for not, qualifying. And we also see in the Sunday Times that SARS is actually going after some very senior people who haven't paid taxes, who haven't declared their full income. Talk to us firstly about the City Press headline. And what is interesting there, of course, is that Deputy President David Mabuza is saying, why pick on me? But if you read closer, he actually says that if there's a credible argument that is made for him to step down, he will do so. But Mr. Magashule is saying, I want to remind everyone that everyone is proven is innocent until proven guilty, even though there are, layers and layers of information that at the very least should put Mr. Magashule as a suspect in a case around fraud, corruption, racketeering, and a whole range of other things.
You know, I mean, when I read this article, the first thing that I thought about was Batabile Dlamini's comment about small Nyana skeletons, everybody calls it, you know. And I mean, that his comments dovetail beautifully with, I see that City Press and Sunday Times spoke to former President Thabo Mbeki.
Yes.
And he was saying that, well, you know, the ANC cannot just close their eyes, they need to act on these things, and they have to be seen to be acting on these things.
Yes.
And Magashule, to a degree, is correct. There shouldn't just be a focus on him, but that doesn't absolve him.
Yes.
He needs to answer very serious...
and very specific allegations.
Very specific. I mean, I think that Peter Louis Meiburg did a fantastic job, and he actually presented a body of evidence that is compelling for a criminal case, and at the very least for the ANC to tackle, especially now ahead of the election, and with corruption being so high on everybody's list of critical factors ahead of this election. I expect that the ANC should come out and forthright and deal with this, but they're not. They're going into the old mold of the ANC, which is to deflect and I mean there seems to be a lot of undecidedness as to how to deal with this.
But what is not complicated is the speed with which the president moved to appoint new heads in very critical institutions. So, for example, he appointed Shamila Batoy, and he didn't do it himself so that she can be his instrument. He did it via committee. We had her 2 deputies declared unfit, and he has sacked them. One of them is taking the matter on review. So that begins to give the law enforcement agencies the weapons, because the people who have been holding back the investigations are now out of the leadership. So Shamila Batoy now needs to move. She hasn't said a word except to comment on the fact that the deputies are out, and I suppose she's got her hands full. But surely now we need to hear from her, because she's been enabled. She's been enabled by the president. She's been enabled by the reforms that have happened in the criminal justice system, insofar as the head of the Hawks, the head of crime intelligence, the head of SAPS, all of those things have been changed. She can now work a lot more closely with them. The state capturers at the top level, at least, have been taken out. Why are we not hearing from her? Beauregard?
I think she's learned from her predecessors that getting embroiled in, well, first of all, there's criminality involved. And if you just try to do your job and try to play this straight up the line, I think you, more often than not, you get your fingers burnt, or
yes.
In fact, you actually get dismissed. But then on the flip side, I mean, her hand has been strengthened, yes, by the president, but even the president hasn't acted with any decisiveness. Remember, all of these things that you mentioned before this have happened by process and hasn't been directly done, essentially, by Ramaphosa. So he can take some credit, but not all the credit. He hasn't acted on the Secretary General. He's also the president of the ANC. What has he done about this? So I think that Shamila Batoy has acted quite cleverly in all respects.
But now let's look at another institution, and this is the Sunday Times story. It says SARS is going after ANC top brass in Bosasa scandal.
Yes.
Now, of course, SARS is one of the organizations that was the target of state capture. We see the morphing of the state capturers. Ace Magashule suddenly now wants an alliance with the EFF, and the EFF has been the biggest defender of Tom Moyane and insists the rogue unit exists. It is Floyd Shivambu that went to the public protector, which is now compelling Minister Pravin Gordhan to go back to a matter that has actually been resolved by the Nugent Commission of Inquiry, by a court of law. So quickly, how effective is SARS using its institutional capacity to actually get to the nub of the matter?
I think that they are probably going to be more effective than any other organization, because for them it comes down to brass tacks. They have got tangible evidence that they can actually use and say, look, you can talk about this, claim this and that and the other, but here we have money that moved from X to Y and you didn't report this, and therefore it's a criminal offense.
Beauregard, thank you so very much for joining us. Well, that's what you have heard from the Deputy Editor of the Mail and Guardian. You've had your fix for the week. Take care. See you again next week.